Hello and welcome to today's talk time. I hope you are excited about today, as I am. We're going to be talking about metaphors that heal, storytelling for the subconscious. So buckle up and I hope you enjoy this one. Now, the subconscious, it deals with things like symbols, images, and stories really well, bypassing the logical levels often. If we think about metaphors that are woven into our everyday language pattern, we're using metaphors all the time. So an example would be, I feel as heavy as lead. So are you going to be as heavy as lead? Probably not. But we use that to exchange an idea of how tired we are. But we haven't said, I'm tired. Okay, but people understand the metaphor heavy as lead, meaning you're very, very tired. We will often use metaphors to describe our state of belief or our state of experience, and others around you will, I guess, embed that meaning through the metaphor that you're sharing. We can use metaphors, though, in a therapeutic way, which is really exciting. So let's get into this. Metaphors work on a universal human level because most people, they're brought up with myths and legends and fairy tales and dreams. And so we understand that kind of language. I remember listening to the what was it called? The Bad Jelly the Witch. And it was such a wonderful animation where Spike Milligan, he took us on a journey into this incredible moment where there was a witch and a monster that lost his pants because the, what do you call it? The mouse had nibbled on the things that held up his trousers. And there was Lucy the cow, and there was this little wee worm that helped out, and a tree that was magical that could grow. He just brought things to life. Now, it doesn't matter about the story itself and all the hidden meanings. It's what that child is listening to and how they are mapping and making sense of it in their own unique way. So what that story means to me might be quite different to what it means to someone else. However, it was massively appealing to a wider audience. It was humorous for a start. It took you into a fascination of a world that doesn't necessarily exist, but it felt like it did. So through his animation of voice and storytelling, it brought it to life. And I think as a hypnotherapist, this is what I tell my students anyway, is the way that we journey someone through a hypnotic metaphor, we want to be the ultimate storyteller. We want to bring it to life. So it's not just about going up a mountain or visiting a lake or following a path or whatever that is. We want to bring it to life in some way that is relatable and makes sense. For example, if you were to pick up a book and it was describing a scene, so the sunlight dappled down through the trees, dancing on the forest floor, we can actually bring some of the hypnotic metaphoric journeys to life in that way. However, we also don't want to destroy the client's idea of what the forest looked like, because they might not have the same forest as you have in your mind. However, we can set up some scenes in a metaphoric way. So, for example, there might be within this enchanted forest hidden doors. Now, are these hidden doors actually existing in real life? Probably not. However, in that dreamy space, that can absolutely be something that is possible. So just like Alice in Wonderland, where a door opened and down she went into this amazing world. When we're looking at that idea of taking someone on a metaphoric journey, their mind will start to join the dots all by themselves. So let's say, imagine you've got the lake and you've got the four seasons, very, very different to one another. And at some point, let's imagine you're in the atmosphere where the lake freezes over and the ice is there, solid, as if it will never melt again. However, there's a turning point where the seasons start to create a shift in temperature, and the sun becomes longer in the sky, and the ice that felt so rigid, so hard, begins to melt. Now, the client listening to this, if they're going through some sense of stuckness where they think, God, I'm never going to get over this, then using metaphoric language that is inviting that idea of constant perpetual change, that you're not stuck, never have been, that the weather, the emotional weather changes. So we can use these very interesting spaces to amplify an idea of impermanence or an idea of change or new life, new beginnings. It could be, again, we get into the long nights of summer, where in some atmospheres the sun doesn't even go down fully. It feels like dusk all throughout the night. And if you've never been there, you might not be able to relate. And this is where we want to make sure that when you're talking about a metaphor, we want it to be relatable enough to that person that's come in. So if the person is into cars, then you might do a story or metaphor around cars. If the person is into fishing, you might do a metaphoric journey around fishing. So you're appealing to that person's interests and you're allowing embedded symbology or sort of ideas to be in that landscape that is familiar to the client. When the client goes into that daydreamy space and invited to think about it in a certain way, not explaining it to the nth degree, by the way. So metaphors need to be ones that you're not over-explaining. So you're leading the client to a degree. So you might have, let's imagine someone's into ballet and they've been very well trained, but there was a time where they didn't know how to do all of the things correctly. And so you can allow a metaphor where they might enjoy nature, and it might be the story of perhaps a baby bird learning to fly. But there are times where it's not ready to fly, that it has to wait until its wings are fully formed. Now, the ballerina idea, let's say that the person is embedded in the ballerina kind of world, and you think, okay, well, how does a bird relate to a ballerina? Well, in many ways it could, because when a young girl goes and starts to practice all the different foot movements, their body's still developing, and point shoes are not something that will happen until further down in a ballerina's journey. They have to use standard ballet slippers. So when we're kind of looking at that time where they can elevate themselves to that next level, there needs to be that perfect timing. So using the analogy or the metaphor of the bird, the baby bird, needing to be fed, that could be relating to the people who are teaching you and supporting you and so on. But there comes a time where you become independent. So that's that ballerina who's gone through all the training, is now understanding what to do and how to do it. And now that ballerina is ready to go out into the world and make a career of it, ready to fly. So that's where the bird analogy can kind of meet quite nicely with the person's journey. Perhaps the person was scared of going out into the world, And even though all the training and everything was embedded and there, that particular person was struggling around confidence to really, have I got what it takes to go out there and achieve that goal? So they come in for a hypnotherapy session to support them on their journey of confidence. And maybe they had an injury, perhaps that happened, and they weren't able to perform like they used to. And that could be changing direction. So that could be, again, coming back to what kind of metaphor might be around changing direction. Something pops into my mind, and I think of an exciting journey where you come to the fork in the road. Okay, so you can either go down this side or this side, the right side or the left side. It's up to you. But imagine if you embed within that metaphoric story that no matter what path, there's an exciting journey ahead of you. So neither path is right or wrong. It's just different. If a person can feel comfortable with making a decision and trust that even though it might be a different path, it's going to be just as rewarding, just different, that can be very, very useful. So using a metaphor like that fork in the road and journeying things that might be different but perfect in every way, this is where we can start to layer hypnotic language within that metaphoric story. Not every metaphor, like I'm giving you here, has to match the exact issue that the person is going through in that direct way. So, for example, if someone was wanting to compete and win a triathlon, and they're really aiming to be the best athlete, this is not necessarily something that you might directly use as a metaphor in the way of their own journey. You could be the idea of the tortoise and the hare, or something like that, where sometimes slow and steady wins the race. Now, obviously, this person doesn't want to go slow, but it could be that you play around with the metaphor in some way, and there are some understandings. So perhaps you could play with the hare actually wins the race because he goes and gets more clever about things. So the tortoise actually loses in the end because the hare realizes that every second counts. So we can begin to manipulate a very well-known metaphor, meaning story, and we can change it up into something that is going to be more in line with that person's journey and tweak it up, change it up a bit. This is where trusting your gut when it comes to creativity and creating a metaphor off the cuff can be a really important part of a journey as a hypnotherapist. I hope you're enjoying today's chat about metaphors. There are many classic metaphors, so let's just journey a couple of those. So the mountain climb, going up the mountain. There can be many things that this mountain might represent to the client, the small steps, the reaching of the goals, and the resilience that it might take to journey up that mountain. The healing river, so the symbol of letting go or cleansing or renewing. So I quite like actually the river analogies for some people in the way of, how would we put it? The idea of being water. So it's not just going to a river, but it's about being water that can move through all sorts of landscapes easily. And imagine like you were water and you could move through your world in a really easy way, finding a way to fit in that is comfortable and snug. So that's where we can start to use those kind of stories or ideas. The locked door with a key, finding that inner resource and unlocking hidden potentials, resolving stuckness in some way, or the garden analogy, the growth and planting that seed in your interior mind garden of possibilities. I love using that as a metaphor. Weeding out the old thoughts that don't serve you anymore, things like that. There are so many wonderful metaphors that as hypnotherapists we often go to, but there are also metaphors that you can create that are based on your client's need. So starting with their world, notice their imagery, their hobbies, their symbols. They might actually be using metaphors already. So the client might use, I feel really turbulent, like the ocean. I feel like a storm all the time's happening. Use it. Get that client to imagine the storm passing and that better weather's ahead. Why not use it? Aligning with their goals is a big part of it too. Calming metaphors, addiction, strengths, direction, grief, healing, renewal. All of these things can really be woven into the story and made for that client's specific individual needs. I'm not someone that uses scripts, by the way. I do trust in my own creativity, and I understand that that's not necessarily how other hypnotherapists work, and that's okay. However, I like to be client focused, so I'm listening to the client, I'm gathering resources from the way that the client's been unpacking and sharing that with me, and I'm going to utilize that client's language and their metaphors in a really creative way. And that I think that's what I enjoy most about being a hypnotherapist is that creative part of my job. It's not boring. If I was to sit and just use a generic script for everyone, I don't know if I'd actually survived this many years. I think having that creative edge keeps me on my toes and it keeps it interesting. Let's put it that way. Yes, there are some metaphors I might repeat for some clients that are very, again, universal, but I love changing them up. Like the same story is never told twice. I will add little elements of what the client has brought from their world of understanding. Leaving space for that interpretation, just want to really reinforce that part. Because if you over-explain what the metaphor was all about, it loses potentially its magic meaning for the client. The client needs to join the dots. This is where the breakthroughs come in, is when they're quietly listening and they're joining the dots that make sense to them. That's really what counts. So the practical application in hypnotherapy, this is where if you're guiding them into a healing garden, and crossing a bridge, there are so many possibilities of what the healing garden might represent, of what it is healing. The crossing of the bridge is, where is it taking you? All of these incredible things that you can do. This is where, if I imagine a bridge, I don't necessarily have to share that the bridge is made of metal, and every time they walk across it, they can hear the creaky boards underneath their feet. No, the client can embellish what the bridge is and what it's made of. That's up to the client to create that. You don't have to be coming with great detail, but you can invite a sketch of something where the client can take that and really run with it in their own way. If we over-explain something, you're killing the client's opportunity to create something magical that makes sense to them. So remember that. Metaphors can be short as well, one-liners or long extended stories. They don't have to be always long stories, definitely one-liners, because we deal with that metaphoric language all the time. Like I said at the beginning, as heavy as lead, that is a one-liner. As light as a feather, another one-liner, opposite to feeling overwhelmed or something like that. So as light as a feather, as cool as a cucumber, people have heard these metaphors used in common speech all the time, but your client will be using them as they come into a session with you. And that is opportunity to help them to reverse the metaphor. It might not be that you're the one forcing the reverse in the way of coming up with what the reverse would be. You can actually ask the client, hey, I noticed that you were saying you feel as heavy as lead. How do you want to feel? And then they might come up with as light as a feather, So this is where the client has the answers, and that's where you can then embed that feather journey. Perhaps that becomes an extended long story, that the feather goes for this journey into these incredible places because it's as light as a feather. Who knows? Key takeaways I hope that you will get from this session today with Talk Time is metaphors speak directly to the subconscious, okay, bypassing resistance. And they can create a safe space for transformation, especially for sensitive issues. Effective metaphors come from the client's own imagery and experiences. And the therapist's role is to plant the metaphor and let the client's subconscious expand it. I hope you have enjoyed today's Talk Time. If you're interested in learning to become a hypnotherapist, please visit my website, NZACH.ac.nz, and there's a lot of information about our diploma course there. If you have any questions for me, please let me know, get in touch. And if you've enjoyed this, please comment below. I'd love that. And if you haven't already, follow us. And for those that are following, thank you very much. And if you've liked this, like it. It really does make a difference to the algorithms of who gets to see these videos. It is a big world out there, and a lot of creators are posting, a lot of stuff out there. And I'm just a little human in New Zealand posting once a week. And to grow this channel and to get a bigger understanding happening out there into the world, I would love it to have this channel become something that people can come to as a resource and find all sorts of interesting things to do with hypnosis. So thank you for tuning in today, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week. Thank you. Ka kite.